All right, we're live. I don't know if anyone's watching. Okay, well, it is running on Twitch, so that's good to know. So we're going to give folks a few minutes to sort of trickle in. Hopefully, they will trickle in. Otherwise, I will most certainly have to keep a recording of this and post it later. So, tried my best to advertise this little live stream. That's what most of my day has been. So hopefully, we catch one or two people. Don't know if we actually will.
I guess we'll see soon enough.
Yeah. But I guess while we wait, you played any interesting historical games yet? They can be video games or tabletop games or anything like that.
Yeah, there's one that I had gotten in the Steam sale probably last summer that I've been trying out a little bit. We the Revolution.
We the Revolution.
Yeah, it is a narrative game where you are a judge in one of the revolutionary courts of France during the French Revolution.
Huh.
And I've not gotten all that far into it, but I just finished up the trial of Louis the 16th. So,
Oh. Huh. I'm looking at it right now. That's an interesting art style. It's kind of
yeah,
reminiscent of Dishonored.
I don't remember how I came across it. I think it was in Suggesteds maybe, or I might have seen it advertised somewhere in an article. But so far, it's pretty interesting. I know that I've not gotten to see the game, in full. There's still a few features that I've not gotten to, but so far it's pretty cool.
Huh. It's always that's one of the things I love about Steam is like it has these weird little indie games that like focus on a very specific historical subject. Like I know there's a like a sort of turn-based strategy RPG about the Warsaw Uprising. I think that's somewhere on Steam, which looks really interesting. I forget what it's called though.
I don't think I've seen it before. This sounds really cool.
It's literally called Warsaw, and it's like it's kind of like Final Fantasy, like in terms of it's like turn-based combat sort of deal, and it's basically just the Warsaw Uprising. So, yeah.
I'll have to give that one a look sometime. What have you been playing recently other than Tannenberg and Verdun?
Me personally, nothing historical. I started playing Stardew Valley.
Nice.
So I have kind of spent a lot of my free time going crazy over a fake virtual farm. But it's a successful farm.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, Stardew Valley's a fun time.
Yeah. All right.
Now they've got that board game coming out.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Well, as well get started with the conversation because this is going to be on YouTube anyway. Um, because it is Friday. Cheers. So anyway, for those who might be joining us a little late, welcome. This is not the Tattooed Historian Twitch channel like you're normally used to. This is the Barry Mick History Twitch channel. I am Andrew of Barry Mick History. This is what I look like. So I'm no longer a disembodied voice yelling at John. And because John's still on vacation, we can't stream Tannenberg or Verdun like we would usually do. So figured let's just have a chat. And I have Zach with me, who was on the last couple of Tannenberg streams with us. And we might have some more people joining later. Who knows? I spent most of today and yesterday trying to figure that one out. But Zach, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so like Andrew said, my name is Zach. I am originally from southeastern Kentucky. Shout out to Mill Springs Battlefield, which is one of the newest national park sites that's coming into the system. I volunteered there in high school and grew up hearing all about General Zollicoffer, the Confederate commander, who had a very unfortunate day during the battle. To put it mildly, he was killed during the fighting, and it was pretty much just a textbook example of what not to do in a fight for his forces. But I digress. Went to Gettysburg College, graduated in May. Knew Andrew pretty early on in our first semester on campus. And yeah, for the time being, I am working with the public library system in Gettysburg, doing public programming.
And it's through Gettysburg that I pieced together our little Verdun / Tannenberg crew, because most of the people involved in that are Gettysburg College, either graduates or current students. Because the only thing that we like more than arguing about history is playing video games about history. I think if you take a look at any of our Steam libraries, you'll find a considerable number of history-based video games, ranging from the mainstream like Call of Duty to the more obscure like Verdun, Tannenberg, anything that like Postscriptum or Beyond the Wire, that sort of thing. So we're here tonight talking about historical video games. Zach, what is your opinion of historical video games in general as like a tool for public historians?
Yeah, I think that they are a really good way to get people exposed to stories that they might not have heard of otherwise. Big example being the hype around World War I when Battlefield 1 came out. There were folks that I would see on campus that would just occasionally be talking about World War I, and they otherwise would have no interest in that period of history. And here we have a game that we can argue until we're blue in the face about what it gets wrong about the actual history, but it does at least get a conversation started.
Yeah, that's true. And folks who have watched me or watched our past Verdun and Tannenberg streams have known I despise Battlefield 1 for its blatant and various historical inaccuracies. It's almost as if they didn't open a book. That being said, I will never deny its usefulness as introducing those stories. I don't think most people knew what the Ottoman Empire was, or that it was involved in the First World War until they played Battlefield 1. unless they saw Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, got a visitor coming
Is
in.
that the cat that hates everyone, or the other
Uh,
one?
oh yeah, this is the one that hates everything in the world.
uh, but yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you that historical-based video games tend to serve as a very good introduction to certain historical periods and subjects. Um, Although I do think that there gets a point when they go maybe a little too intense on that. Like, for instance, one of the games I mentioned earlier was Beyond the Wire, and its World War II equivalent, Postscriptum, which they're fantastic games, technologically amazing, but they kind of rely on a sort of previous knowledge of the conflicts that they're portraying to really get a lot of impact. Like I wouldn't expect some high school kid to actively want to play a game like Postscriptum or Beyond the Wire unless they had an interest in the First or Second World Wars beforehand. Um, they're also just really intense and border on the line of video game and military simulator.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, my experience with that was Red Orchestra too, uh,
Oh,
which of course that was I guess my first experience. A lot of my friends' first experience to the kind of the more hardcore style of shooter other than Call of Duty and Battlefield.
yeah.
It absolutely ripped us apart. We were a bunch of high schoolers running around, not knowing what was going on, getting absolutely ripped to shreds in the Battle of Stalin.
Yeah, I actually recently tried to get into Red Orchestra 2 because, I've been looking for a not as intense, technologically speaking, big multiplayer World War II game, and found out Red Orchestra 2 does not have the most active servers anymore. um, for some reason, Red Orchestra 1 does.
I've heard that it has a huge cult following still. I've never played it, but I've heard before that it still has a very
Yeah,
active fan base.
yeah. But with Red Orchestra 2, you also get Rising Storm, which is all Pacific Theater stuff. And then there's the Rising Storm 2 sequel, which is all Vietnam. And the only downside of that is that the player base for Rising Storm 2 is okay with racism.
Hmm.
It's kind of why
I
it's kind
I
of why I
just
stopped playing that.
recently got it, but I have not played it yet. So
Oh, um, yeah, it's an interesting time. Um, but yeah, I think that's one of the big downsides uh, to historical gaming is a lot of these games are very multiplayer focused, and when they're multiplayer focused, you get a whole cast of characters that I'm sure you're familiar with, and anyone who's ever played an online game, regardless of what kind of genre it is familiar with. Uh, I think that comes with negative impacts. from
oh,
what
definitely.
Yeah, from what I've heard, uh, a Civil War first person shooter that we both are aware of that shall remain nameless, um, has interesting views amongst their community on the Civil War. Uh, so anyway, so we've recently been playing um, the World War One game series, which is the big umbrella title for Verdun and Tannenberg. Uh, Zach, how long have you been playing Verdun?
I had Verdun when it was in. think it was beta early access. I got it on my birthday back in 2014, I think.
Hmm.
2013, 2014, whenever it came out, it was still very new. There were so many bugs that they were actively encouraging people to message them about to fix in each patch update.
I think I got Verdun in 2015 as well, either 2015 or 2014, and it was early access and all that. And I remember every update would either increase my ability to play the game or decrease my ability to play the game because I mean the way they advertised it when it first came out was basically like a more realistic Battlefield. Um, I think they announced Battlefield One a couple months after at least I personally picked up Verdun. Um, so I think the developers were trying to like implant that idea of this is good. We're going to compete with Battlefield One, which not to knock indie developers, but it's very hard. It would be very hard for a game like Verdun to realistically compete with Battlefield One. But I remember Verdun until it got like a definitive full release. It was a mess, at least from what I remember.
Every time that I would try to play it before that full release, uh, the one memory that stands out to me, which I had mentioned in one of the Tannenberg sessions in passing, I don't know what the bug would be called, but I refer to it as the blue ghost or the French ghost. There was an untextured model that would run around the map and it would be glowing like a palish blue white. And, it's like the face was there or the head was there, but no face. And it would have, I think, two of the chasseur's arms hovering around its head, almost like some weird demented halo. But, it would just go charging around the map and get caught in barbed wire and flail around and ragdoll. And it was pretty creepy to watch.
Oy. Yeah, I don't think I ever encountered any bugs that bad. Um, but my experience playing that when I was in early access was very intermittent, and like there were whole stretches of time when I just wouldn't play it. But I remember when the full release finally came out, and it was like, oh, I hope this works now, and it did for a decent amount of time. It also didn't help that my computer at the time was awful. Um, Verdun is the reason why I learned the importance of RAM in most in computers, because I was constantly like, considering, cracking open my laptop and upgrading the RAM so that Verdun can just run. I didn't care about graphics. I just wanted it to function. um, but then they announced Tannenberg, like I think the same year Verdun's full release dropped, and everyone was like, "Wait, there's an Eastern Front," um, which is part of the reason why I love that we're doing streams in Tannenberg now, because we get to talk about the Eastern Front of the First World War. Um, did you jump on the Tannenberg wagon early on, or did you wait like I did?
Yeah, I waited for quite a while before I got Tannenberg. What ultimately got it for me was when I saw that they added the Bulgarians. I mentioned the Bulgarians a lot, just kind of in passing, but not to beat a dead horse. But I saw the Bulgarians, and I automatically bought it as soon as I saw that.
You and your Bulgarians. See, I got Tannenberg when I got my new laptop that I'm currently using right now, because I figured, hey, this thing runs stuff better now. Probably run Tannenberg. And it was shortly after I got Tannenberg that I went to John with the idea for the live streams. Uh, so, but it was interesting to see, you know, a finished product that is completely different from Verdun just like come out all of a sudden. Like it's there. Uh, it obviously didn't go through the same uh, beta process as Verdun did, not to the same extent because Verdun was in beta for felt like 4 or 5 years. I think the first beta, I think the first closed beta was like in 2013.
It was. I think it was still in beta by the time we got to college. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and then Tannenberg just comes out and it's just finished or mostly finished. It's a little weird. And now I'm doing that whole process again with Beyond the Wire, which is fun.
I have not gotten to test it out yet. It looks good from what I've seen, but it also looks like it would absolutely shred my hardware. So,
Oh man, yeah. I've let me pull up my Steam account because I can tell you exactly how many hours I have put into Beyond the Wire so far. It is. I have played it for. I had 4 hours logged in that game, and most of them were enough to say that I adequately played it enough to write a review of it, which I did. Um, but it's technically it is intense. Um, you need like a really high quality gaming PC to run it, uh, and to run it well. I mean, I can barely stagger through matches, um, and that's usually if I'm just completely separated from everyone because the maps are massive. They are massive, uh, and so the last time I played it, I felt like Snoopy in It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, when he's pretending to be the World War One flying ace, and he's just crawling through the trees, trying not to be spotted by the enemy. I just felt like that.
it's been a long time since I've seen Snoopy do his fighting against the Red Baron.
But yeah, and that actually takes us to an interesting topic in that the centennial of the First World War saw an explosion in First World War video games, not just Verdun and Tannenberg, but you know Battlefield One, obviously. I know there were a couple World War One RTS games coming out around that time, uh, and I think the one game that I didn't see pop up on anyone's radar, which is the best World War One flying simulator of all time, was Snoopy versus the Red Baron. Um,
I don't think I've seen that one.
yeah, there are a couple of them actually,
Huh.
but yeah, no, there was no Snoopy game uh, during the centennial or post centennial, at least none that I know of, which is sad because Snoopy is like one of the go-to sources of Great War memory. Like no one, if you don't know anything about the First World War, you've probably still heard of Snoopy, the World War One flying ace, and you've probably heard the Snoopy versus the Red Baron Christmas song, at the very least. And that's not even the only song.
Well, what surprised me the most, maybe in terms of films, partially this is because I grew up kind of in the shadow of Sergeant York's legacy. I figured that there would be a reboot of the Sergeant York movie for the centennial, and I was really surprised when that happened.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, the centennial here in the United States was kind of weird because we didn't do anything. until um, what was it, 2017, until like April of 2017 or March or April of 2017 when the actual centennial of the U.S. entering the war happened, um, which is it's a very us uh, thing to do because during the actual war we kept an eye on things, but we didn't really care much for what was going on until we were in there. So, and then 2017 came around, and everyone was like, "Hey, World War I is a thing." um, but yeah, I'm surprised we didn't really get a lot of World War I films, especially like World War I films about the American Expeditionary Force during the centennial here in the States. We certainly have gotten a few since then. I know there's, I know there was a fairly recent one. I think it came out just last fall about the mutiny in Texas during 1917 or 1918. Black regiment that was facing discrimination because, of course, they're going to face discrimination. They're in Texas, and it's 1917. But I can't remember the name of that movie.
I didn't know they'd made a movie about it.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm gonna look it up.
Another thing I wish that they would have highlighted, speaking of Texas, is U.S. intervention in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean the punitive expedition is sort of like this weird little military action that we do in 1916 to like I don't even know why we did it because that whole situation is just a mess. Apparently, Pancho Villa and his rebels uh, crossed the border a couple times and shot up a couple border towns, from what I remember. And the U.S. Army is like, everyone to the border, and all these like junior officers or they're junior officers at that point. They go up to field rank, and they'd be eventually become generals by the end of the First World War. Guys like Patton are there. Pretty sure Pershing is there. But yeah, we didn't really. I don't think you saw any commemoration or really even acknowledgement of the punitive expeditions, uh, which I think really goes to show the place of the First World War and that entire era in at least American memory. It's not as big of a deal compared to the Second World War, uh, which I mean, when you have an when you're only in the war for 18 months, it's kind of hard to make a case that it's a big deal to your country, um, because nothing I think significantly changed for the U.S. as a at least direct result of the war. Certainly indirect results. You know, First World War directly leads into the Roaring Twenties, which then directly leads into the stock market crash.
It's weird. Some of the research that I've done on the community in and around Gettysburg and some of the Pennsylvania Dutch community, it seemed like a lot of changes happened on the local scale, but then they didn't really translate to anything big. There was a newspaper story that I came across. At one point, it was two teenagers. I think they were from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It might have been from Hanover, but it was in the Gettysburg paper just after war broke out. They were in Chicago speaking Pennsylvania German, and somebody at the station overheard them and reported them to the authorities as potential German spies. And so they were detained and questioned, and then eventually the authorities determined, yeah, these guys are just two kids from Pennsylvania that grew up speaking Pennsylvania German. They're not German spies. Um,
Yeah, I used to work at Ellis Island, and during World War One, Ellis Island was still functioning as an immigration processing center, um, but at a significantly uh, decreased capacity. Um, but at the same time, it was also being used to detain what the legislation at the time referred to as suspected enemy aliens. Um, so this is sort of setting the precedent for what we see in World War II with the internment of Japanese Americans, but during World War One, the United States government is arresting recent German immigrants, German Americans, um, all over the United States, and is detaining them because they think, oh, these guys might actually be spies. And to be fair, the Germans actually do send a fair number of spies to the U.S. One of the largest terrorist attacks, or one of the largest events classified as a terrorist attack, uh, in New York, occurred in 1916 at a place called Black Tom Island. You ever heard of that?
yeah, I remember we've talked about it in some of the streams. Dr. Isherwood's Great War Class, if I recall right, he was showing us a picture, or we read a book that had a picture of it in it for his class. And I had never heard of that. It just seemed strange that somehow this event that looked like it would be huge in terms of national significance is barely talked about anymore, if at all.
Well, until the attacks on September 11th, it was one of the largest terrorist attacks in the New York area on record. Apparently, you could hear the explosion all the way up in Connecticut. It was that big because it was this giant munitions warehouse complex that just blew up one night. I was actually doing some reading into that. They apparently suspected for a hot minute that it was Irish socialists responsible for it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because at the time, this fellow who you may be familiar with named James Larkin, who was
Yeah.
a key member of the Dublin lockouts in 1913, was engaging in union activity in the New York, New Jersey area, and they thought, oh, these are those crazy Irish Republicans who just tried to declare a republic a couple months ago in Dublin on Easter. They're just blowing up the stuff that we're sending to Britain. And it was Larkin who gave he gave an affidavit to the U.S. government a couple years after the war ended that basically said, "Hey, there were some German dudes there also.
Hmm.
It was them. I was just I was just telling guys to slow down their work and maybe break a couple machines, not actually blow anything up." Uh,
Jeez.
yeah,
Hmm.
but yeah, but First World War memory in general, it's a bigger deal in Europe, uh, especially Great Britain. It's a super big deal in France. They
Oh, yeah.
really, I mean, between England and France, that's like a, pretty much every rural village uh, has a monument to the First World War. Uh, it'd be strange not to have that. Um, and what's a very interesting thing to look at is German memory of the First World War, because you can always look at how the winners remember the war that they won, but how do the losers remember it? And I think Germans have a very interesting way of looking at the war, uh, because of everything that happens as a result of Versailles.
Yeah. Yeah. German memory, it's in a lot of ways breaking, a legacy of German settlement, and in some ways, German identity stretching back into the early Middle Ages. You've got some of the areas in Poland and what were once upon a time East Prussia that the German state had considered German at various points in time since the 12 and 1300s that have been fought over again and again. And then, of course, this pops up in the Second World War with very tragic results. This question, especially in parts of Poland, about who is Polish, who is German, and what does that look like?
Yeah. And, you know, I actually don't know where to go from there. uh, wow, we are still at 0 viewers. Anyway, so back to the overall topic that we started with. How does this memory translate into the video game world? Because I think more and more historians and academics are starting to take video games and more mainstream popular culture seriously as works of memory. In fact, are you familiar with the Royal Armouries Museum in
Mm-hmm.
Leeds? So they've actually been they partnered with GameSpot, a video game magazine, very long-running video game magazine. And they got their keeper of firearms and artillery, this guy Jonathan Ferguson, to basically critique video game portrayals of firearms.
Huh.
And they've been doing videos for the past couple of months. And they've done games like Battlefield 1, Call of Duty World War II. It's not just historical games though, because they also have done games like Cyberpunk 2077, and it's really just this guy, Jonathan Ferguson, just sitting and watching someone else play the game and just pausing it at certain moments to critique. Here's what they did well about this particular firearm. Here's what they did wrong. Here's probably why they got it wrong. Here's an example of the real world thing. And now that's started to spill over onto the Royal Armory's own YouTube channel, because they're now doing that on their own. And I love watching it because it makes me feel validated.
Yeah, I have never seen any of those videos. I love some of the Royal Armories productions that they've done on, especially like the arming of knights or the arming of the British soldier through this particular time period. But I wasn't aware of the collaboration with GameSpot.
Yeah, and Ferguson, you might be familiar with him if you're an avid viewer of the Forgotten Weapons YouTube channel, because he's definitely popped up there many times. But I do like how more and more academics or academic types are starting to look at these video games, and they're starting to say, "Hey, we can actually use this. This is something that we can use for what we do," which is part of the reason why I went to John with the idea for our little overdone live streams, is because people won't most people will gladly listen to anyone talk about anything if they're playing a video game.
Yeah, that holds.
Yeah. I once watched a video. It wasn't the best video because the guy talking was not the best public speaker, but it was just him playing Call of Duty Black Ops and talking about the Easter Rising and just explaining the history of the Easter Rising. Two completely unrelated things going on. By God, he had my attention for all 15 minutes that he tried to explain the Easter Rising.
This was ages ago now. This probably would have been made back in 2005, 2006. It was, I want to say, either National Geographic or Discovery had a documentary on the fall of the Incas. And for a talk about a battle, they used Age of Empires 3 to model it. And I was a kid at the time. I was obsessed with Age of Empires 3. And here it was on TV, the game that I was obsessed with in a documentary. And I thought it was the most amazing experience ever.
yeah, like you can use these video games to teach anything theoretically. Like you can teach, you know, the rise and fall of empires using games like Age of Empires. You can teach, you know, Napoleonic era tactics with a game like, you know, Napoleon Total War. Um, you can teach army organization of the American Civil War with a game like Ultimate Generals of War, and you can teach, you know, sort of the experience of World War One combat with games like Verdun, Tannenberg, Battlefield One to some extent. Um, you know, I don't think, you know, they're going to be perfect. There's a lot of things you can't that don't translate well in a video game, but they are still, you know, tools that are readily available. You know, my dream one day is to see a class on World War One where the professor just loads up Verdun and just plays around, and or just has like a student play around, and you know, just use that as a way to introduce, you know, what they're discussing in class. I think that would definitely be an interesting uh, history class. Uh,
Oh
I
yeah.
would love to take that class. Um,
Have, are you familiar with the Discovery Tour that the last couple Assassin's Creed titles have had?
no.
So that touches on that really well. It's an educational component that you can either buy separately or download with the game, where you can go into the game world and do all of these tours around, could be a specific, say, temple in ancient Egypt or something about the Greek gods, and it's like a virtual tour. They had all of these um, Egyptologists, archaeologists, and historians writing the little blurbs of information, almost like a museum wayside, and then they'll have pictures of actual artifacts and archaeological sites, and you can see the recreation of it. And I was reading a magazine article where I think Ubisoft had worked with teachers in, I want to say, LA, and it was really well received.
Huh. Yeah, for some reason, Ubisoft has like published some of my favorite historical video games, or at least the ones that I respect the most for their historical merit. Because they also published the Brothers in Arms series, which, you know, you kind of have to try really hard to find something, you know, blatantly, overtly wrong history wise with those. Um, they've also published one of my favorite World War One games, Valiant Hearts: The Great War, which, you know, is, in my opinion, the perfect example of Great War memory in a video game, because it is just a work of memory. And apparently, a lot of the team that worked on that game uh, actually had ancestors who fought in the French army during the First World War. So, for a lot of that team, it was a very personal thing to work on,
Wow.
uh, which is probably why it's such a well made story. And you know, it's even that's a game that you can use in a classroom setting. You know, if you're talking about World War One, or if you're going to talk about the social or psychological impact of the war, because that game definitely explores a lot of that. Um, and then, you know, Ubisoft has also put out the Assassin's Creed games, which I'm gonna. They're not the best in terms of their history, um, but they certainly do their best to at least give you the proper feel. Um, yeah, I actually went through the list of sea shanties in Assassin's Creed 4, and most of them are not period correct at all. But by God, they made a realistic looking ship, and you do feel like you're on the high seas in the golden age of pirates in the Caribbean. But yeah, I don't get why it's always Ubisoft doing it.
I don't know. They've been on a roll for better part of 20 years plus now.
Yeah. And then on the other end of that spectrum, you got EA putting out. Mm.
Which is a
Actually,
shame because some of those old Medal of Honor titles were so much fun.
yeah, I've actually been playing uh, Medal of Honor Allied Assault recently, and you know, from a gameplay perspective, yeah, they are fun. They're really enjoyable games, and I can see why they were so critically acclaimed because for the time period. I mean, they come out in I think I think Allied Assault came out in 2002, uh, which that was cutting edge technology in 2002. Um, but the history is just so bad.
Yeah,
It just doesn't make sense. um, and that's something Medal of Honor kind of struggled with throughout much of its run, at least when they were trying to do historical games. Uh, because you go all the way up to, I think, Medal of Honor Airborne was the last World War II Medal of Honor before their dumb VR Medal of Honor that came out either this year or last year. Um, and I've been thinking about doing a video on just Medal of Honor Airborne for Battle Make History, just so I can bitch about it. Because there was no good goddamn reason that they should have gotten anything wrong about that. And they got almost everything wrong. um, but and then Call of Duty's just always in the middle.
I will say to this day, my favorite World War II game though has got to be Call of Duty 2 Big Red.
Big Red One's a good game. It's a shame that it was only ever on. I think it only ever came out on PlayStation 2 and original Xbox. Because it,
Yeah, I don't remember if it was GameCube or not.
or might have been GameCube, but it was like because they were working. Treyarch got the go ahead, got the green light on that, like around the same time that Infinity Ward was working on like the main Call of Duty 2. Uh, but yeah, Big Red One was actually a really good game, and it's a shame, it's one of the forgotten Call of Duties, uh, because they got like I think they got like portion of the cast from Band of Brothers, not only to just do voice work but also to do mocap for that, um, or performance capture as they call it now in the gaming industry, which is kind of a standard practice now. Um, but I think 2004, 2005, that wasn't a thing that a lot of game studios did, uh, at least regularly. So,
What got me and what still gets me is, are they the only one of the only games I know that has the Vichy French in?
yeah, yeah, that's the interesting thing about Big Red One is that they there are sections of the game where you go up against the various other members of the Axis powers, Japan excluded, because you do fight some Vichy French early on. I think the first mission set in Sicily, you're also fighting Italian troops, uh, which they put up too much of a fight for Italian troops.
Yeah, there were no tankettes that I remember.
I'm not trying to be a dick, but if you read the sources, a lot of Italian troops gave up on the first day of Operation Husky.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I still love those little tankettes. You see them in I think it was an Italian propaganda reel from the fighting in Yugoslavia. There was just a little column of them, and the dudes look like they're twice as tall as these tankettes, and it looks almost like a little Shriners parade at Christmas time.
Yeah, but you know, Call of Duty's always had this like weird middle ground with their historical accuracy. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's kind of just off the walls. Um, and I think it's been getting more off the walls as the years go on because Call of Duty World War II was just flat, was straight up making shit up. um, which brings us to like an interesting point. You and I, we've studied history for years. We can tell an endless array of stories that are incredibly interesting, that would make amazing movies, they would make amazing video games. Why do these developers continue to make shit up?
And I've wondered about that sometimes. Because there's so many bizarre, inspiring, whatever adjective you want to throw in, stories that have yet to be told. Like with World War One, I mean, you have U.S. troops fighting around the Arctic Circle in Russia.
Yeah,
Uh, and I mean, you could have a series on that, and it would be a story that nobody's ever heard of. But instead, we keep going back to like the zombies. That's the only way I know how to describe it. It's like here's this interesting story. Well, where are the zombies? Well, okay. Well, if it doesn't have zombies, no, thank you.
yeah,
Or um, just all of these off the wall. Well, if it could have happened, maybe it would have. Or if they would have had this, they would have used it. Type arguments.
yeah. I remember, in Call of Duty World War II, like the main story of the game has you playing as like a member of a rifle squad in the First Infantry Division, and there's like this section of missions where your squad, along with your platoon sergeant and your platoon leader, are detailed out to go help some British SOE operation to infiltrate Paris the night before the liberation of Paris. And it's just absurd because you have First Infantry Division fighting across the streets of Paris the night before the 28th moves in
Hmm. Hmm.
because they're working on orders from British special intelligence people.
Hmm. Yeah, I've not played that. I have seen part of the clip from the end because a buddy that I was interning with at one point was playing it, and I walked in to see the surrender of Paris. I believe there was a German officer and a bunch of French people were standing there with the American soldiers, and bottles of wine were out. But that is all that I remember seeing.
Yeah, it's a really weird like that whole section of the game is just really weird and makes zero sense historically. And for some reason, the developers felt that it needed to be there. Um, and the weirdest part is they've made a game about the First Infantry Division. They've proven that you don't have to necessarily make shit up to make an exciting, entertaining experience based around the history of the First Infantry during World War II. So they chose to make that up. And I still just can't wrap my head around why.
Yeah, it's the example that always comes to mind for me with game companies doing that is Rise, Son of Rome.
Oh,
Uh, with kind of the alternate timeline of the conquest of Britain, and it's just kind of like there's so many things that you could have done with that actually happened or that are somewhat hinted at in some of the sources and archaeological evidence, but instead we have to make up a whole other narrative about the Romans in Britain.
yeah. This is kind of off topic, but did you ever see the Lord of the Rings Easter egg in Rise, Son of Rome?
I don't recall if I did. Doesn't
So
ring a bell
appar-
at the top of my head.
apparently, at some point in the game, there are like these like little, I guess, shrines, like shrines to the dead that like you find and like go up to them, you press a button, and I think if you find three of them, this like Easter egg, it triggers this Easter egg where the army of the dead from Lord of the Rings. You basically have that just come across the screen.
Huh. Yeah, I never finished the game, so that might have been
Yeah,
beyond where I was at playing it. But
yeah, but like it was some weird shit, and that was a weird game. It was also a weird time for games because that was like the beginning of, I guess now technically the past generation of home consoles because that was an Xbox One launch title, I believe.
that sounds right. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was. There were some weird ones that either were proposed or were created kind of in that vein. There was the whole Call of Duty production on a game set in ancient Rome at one point.
yeah, there were a couple like canceled Call of Duties that I think could have been interesting. There was a Call of Duty Rome that was tossed around for a while. There was also supposed to be supposedly this spin-off Call of Duty set in Vietnam that wasn't even supposed to be a first-person shooter. It was like
Huh.
some like third-person action game, and that also got canceled. Uh, and I think the idea of like a 19th or 18th century Call of Duty has been thrown around, but usually gets canned for jetpacks and exoskeletons. um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there you go. More stories that are really compelling that could be told, but
yeah. Although, I've been hearing rumors about the Call of Duty 2021's subject matter because there have been a couple rumors floating around. There's a rumored title that is going to be called Call of Duty Guerrilla Warfare.
hmm.
I don't know if that's the case because it is only a rumor. There's another rumor that I saw early on, and I haven't really seen it pop up, but I really hope it ends up being true. That it's going to be set during the Korean War,
Ooh, that would
which,
be.
to my knowledge, I don't think there's a Korean War game in existence.
I know of one. It's a RTS title.
Okay.
It's I think Theater of War series. That
Okay.
sounds right. I've never played it. I've seen it on the Steam store, but that's the only one that comes to mind.
Yeah, because I think, a Korean War Call of Duty, even if they like get most of the history wrong, I think that would still be kind of cool, especially now that we're, in the middle of the 70th anniversaries for Korea. So it would be super relevant. Um, but who knows what's going to happen? Because that's all the stuff on the horizon. Because I actually have a couple historical games that I'm looking forward to. Uh, because I went onto the Steam store one night and just looked at all the upcoming games. But do you have anything that you're looking forward to?
Hmm. Yeah, I've been a little bit out of the loop with upcoming titles, but I'd say the big one, just because it played such a big role in my childhood, is Age of Empires. The next Age of Empires title is supposed to be coming
Really, they're making a new one?
out.
Huh.
There was at least one, maybe two or three trailers that dropped mid to late 2020. And it looks like it might be a return to the medieval setting.
All right. That would actually be really cool. Because I am a big fan of Age of Empires 2. That was kind of my thing growing up. Um, there was a game I saw on Steam. I can't remember what it was called though. I'm trying to find it right now. Um, it was a World War II. I think this is it. Maybe It's a World War II, basically like a tank simulator type deal, and it was clearly made with VR in mind. Um, but it's not. VR isn't a requirement, thank God. Um, and basically, it's kind of like it's one of those games where like it's multiplayer, but everyone has a specific job. Um, so basically, you and your friends are a World War II tank crew. Everyone has a specific job in the tank, and it seems really cool. I'm having trouble finding it, but come on. Anyway, but that's something I'm looking forward to. Another thing that I'm looking forward to. I don't know if you have been following. If you follow what the guys who put out Verdun and Tannenberg have been saying on the internet, but yesterday they dropped a teaser for something.
I've not seen that yet, so now I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So I think yesterday they dropped like it's like a 5-second video of someone of basically like a loading sequence for some kind of small uh like an anti-tank weapon of some sort.
Hmm.
And it has a caption like be ready March 24th.
Hmm.
So
5 days.
nobody knows if this is going to be like a new game, or are they adding artillery or tanks or something to the already existing games? Nobody knows, and the internet has been rife with speculation. So I'm excited for that. Uh, I'm hoping that it's a new game. I'm hoping that we are finally going to get a Gallipoli or Middle Eastern theater.
That would be something that I would really be interested in doing.
Uh,
Gallipoli, maybe Italy.
Maybe Italy. That could also be an interesting theater. Um, but yeah, I'm excited for that. Uh, I was hoping we'd have more viewer interaction, but then again, I was also hoping for a decent sized audience. Um, but as the Rolling Stone said, you can't always get what you want. Um, so is there anything you want to talk about?
Hmm. Let's see here. Thinking about historical memory, I guess the game, kind of like you were saying, indie versus the big studios, the AAA studios. Kingdom Come Deliverance is the one that always comes to mind for me with that, because it was, kind of out of nowhere. Hype was building, but if you weren't aware of its existence, you hadn't heard of it. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, "Hey, this is actually a really well done game and pretty well researched." And it's interesting because it is a very Czech story. You've got Jan Hus, you've got the place of Bohemia and modern day Czech Republic at large in the Holy Roman Empire. And there's a lot of really tough questions that pop up all through the 19th and 20th century with Czech independence movement that the game tackles.
Hmm. Yeah, I've heard you talk about it a lot, and I've seen our friend Juan, who's been on a couple of our Verdun and Tannenberg streams. I've seen him play it, uh, and that's always been a game that puzzled me because it seems like the type of thing that no one, except for a very small group of gamers who like actively seek out games like that, would have played. But it's had like a certain degree of mainstream coverage in terms of game like game magazines have covered it. It's had a pretty successful go of things. I just maybe it's because it's just so intensely detailed that everyone's like, "Holy shit, we got to play this."
I think that's part of it. And it does have kind of the encyclopedia built in, like you see in the Assassin's Creed titles. So you can read up about what's a pretzel doing in medieval Bohemia, or medieval brewing, or monastic life. And so it's in some ways kind of like that virtual museum type experience that we had talked about a little bit,
Yeah.
but with very frustrating realistic swordplay.
It's always interesting to see, historical games based outside of the 20th century. Because I don't think it's a stretch to say that the majority of those of like these historical based video games tend to focus on 20th century events like the World Wars, Cold War era, that sort of thing. Um, but I think there is a considerable amount of games that focus on the medieval period as well. Age of Empires, which we just mentioned. You know, the big one that everyone likes to play is Age of Empires 2. Uh, at least I'd wager I think that's a pretty safe bet. That's all medieval stuff. And then you got Kingdom Come. What I want to know is why aren't there any good 19th century games?
That's also a good question. The only ones that I can think of, um, maybe Red Dead 2 at the tail end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, it is interesting how many movies there are, how many popular book series there are that are about, say, the Napoleonic Wars, the Civil War, all kinds of other conflicts and moments in the 19th century, and really it doesn't pop up in video games that much. Like with the Total War series, folks have been saying they wanted a Victorian Total War for a while now, and it's nowhere in sight.
Yeah. I think the last Total War game that came out was set in set in medieval China or around that time. Uh, I think before that was, I think the closest you're ever going to get to a Victorian Total War is the Shogun 2 expansion, Fall of the Samurai.
Yeah, that's true. It is, I guess, kind of a Victorian Total War light
Yeah, but
in some ways.
that's late Victorian, and that's a very niche area of Victorian history. Uh, not that it's not that it's not interesting. Yeah, I think everyone I think everyone who was disappointed with Tom Cruise as the Last Samurai um, found some solace in Shogun 2. Um, but yeah, there aren't really that many games that are focused on the 19th century, and if they do, they tend to focus on the later half of the 19th century. Like you said, Red Dead Redemption 2. I think that's set in the 1890s, uh, which it's a fascinating period, especially in America. But you know, why can't we have a game set maybe during the Gold Rush? I think a Gold Rush game would be awesome. You know,
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. You could do all kinds of different things with that. You could do, uh, kind of like an RPG type setting. You could do city builder. You could do business management simulation. There's so many different ways you could take it.
yeah, and to add on to the whole, there's no good 19th century game. There's extra no good Civil War game. I mean, there are a couple that are pretty decent. I'd argue the best is probably Ultimate General.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Um, but once you get past Ultimate General, you know, there aren't that many left. Which for some reason there is a lot of Civil War games. There's a surprising number of games based on the American Civil War, but most of them suck.
The History Channel Civil War games.
Every time I see the History Channel games, because History Channel went on like a binge in like the mid 2000s where they just put out a bunch of games. I think they put out two Civil War games. I think they also did a World War II game.
Mhm.
Um, and
It was very bland.
they weren't the most interesting first person shooters. And, they were, depending on how you view the History Channel, they were either nothing like you expected or they were exactly what you expected. um, but yeah, I think a lot of developers see Civil War combat or the combat of that period in the 19th century, and they think that's not going to translate into anything other than an RTS well, um, which maybe they're right. I think there is certainly some merit to that argument, but I think on the flip side, no one said you could make. I mean, there were probably people who thought you can make a you know fun and exciting World War One first person shooter, um, and we have several of those now. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
I,
That is a
th-
good point.
I think I think a lot. I think you know as much as we will forever make fun of and chastise games like War of Rights. I can't believe I'm saying this. At least they tried, and they've gotten farther than most would have bothered to. Is it perfect? No. Is it good? Depends on who you ask. I don't think it's a particularly great game. I know there are people who really enjoy it. Um, I know there are people who despise the developers. Um, actually, once witnessed an argument uh, between some authentic Civil War reenactors and one of the designers of the game
Hmm.
on the Civil War reenactors Facebook group,
Dang.
because someone had made a post uh, about the game, sort of just making fun of the game, uh, and one of the guys in the group just so happened to be one of the developers.
Hmm.
Um, which it should probably be mentioned. The game is developed, I think, in Germany or either Germany or somewhere in Northern Europe. Um, so they're doing a lot of secondhand research to develop it, and apparently, allegedly, they have uh, borrowed without asking research for certain uniforms for certain character models,
Hmm.
and you know I know very little of the situation. All I've ever heard is rumors, but I saw this whole thing just turn into this argument in a Facebook comment section, which is always a fun place to watch arguments explode.
Huh. Yeah, I've not played much of War of Rights. I got it when it was in early access before you could even actually attack other characters, other players. It was just the training camp, drill camp type scenario, and I never really played it much past that. Life happened, and I've just never picked it back up. But I've definitely heard bits and pieces here and there about the development and moments like you were just talking about. So it is interesting to see kind of the behind the scenes of what all's going on in both the game community and also with how reenactors and non-reenactors interact with this period, this Civil War game.
Yeah. So before we get too far off this, I found the game that I was talking about, the Tank Crew game. I'm gonna share my screen and see how that works. Share screen. Okay. So this is the game I was mentioning. This is called Steel Crew, and it's literally just a tank. Everyone has a job in the tank, and it's
Huh.
slated for release in 2021. I'm excited for this because when I see a game like this, my first and immediate thought is to go to John Heckman and be like, "Hey, if we ever get tired of Verdun, you want to drive a tank?" um,
Nice. Yeah, it looks really, really well done.
yeah, and as you can see here, you don't necessarily need VR to play this, which I like because I'm probably never going to invest in VR. Um, but a game, that's like that simulator type game that sort of is popularized by VR. I've always wanted to play games like that, but I don't want to drop the hundreds of dollars on a VR setup. So I like it when developers make games that work with VR, but you don't necessarily need VR.
Yeah, I there was a buddy of mine in high school who got to do some research on, I think it was Oculus Rift and Raspberry Pi, but Oculus Rift was very, very new at this point, and so it was like 10 of us on the floor of the dorm that we were in geeking out because he was able to bring it back with him to the dorm. And so I think this might have been during one of the Kentucky snowfalls or right before a break because we didn't have anything to do. So we were all taking turns to do this really trippy VR, almost like a movie experience. But yeah, after that, it was kind of like if I ever were to use this for a game, it would be pure chaos. And like you said, it's ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, and I get baffled when developers try to push new games on VR that like they try to hype up. Because I mentioned earlier there was a Medal of Honor that came out fairly recently. I think it's called Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, and it's a VR exclusive. And while I'm happy to see Medal of Honor trying to make a comeback, especially a comeback in World War II, um, I would have liked to play it. And I know a lot of other people would have liked to play it as well. But I've also heard the reviews, and apparently it's something. The more things change, the more they stay the same, sort of deal.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was looking at store page for it. I think it might have been on Steam. Maybe it was on Origin. I forget which. And the reviews looked like they were very, very mixed.
yeah. I mean, EA probably isn't putting a lot of their eggs in the Medal of Honor basket at this point, because you know after after Call of Duty busted into the modern era and started setting that as the standard, Medal of Honor had trouble catching up. I mean, there was that 2008 Medal of Honor that flopped, and there was Medal of Honor Warfighter, which flopped harder. Um, and so I think EA has just been kind of scared a little, or apprehensive, maybe is the better term, to touch that series, or to let any developers touch that series. And they probably figure, well, Dice, we know Dice is gonna put out a quality Battlefield, every year or every time we ask them to. So we should probably focus our resources on Dice and Battlefield instead of Medal of Honor. Which I mean, if you set the historical nonsense, the historical bullshittery aside of Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, they're pretty good games. Like as games, solely as games, they're they're not bad. Um, I know Battlefield 5 kind of flopped a little, um, but I think that was more because it was coming out right around the same time as Call of Duty World War II, and so there were two World War II games on the market, uh, and people just ended up going with Call of Duty World War II. Uh, but yeah,
But Battlefield 1, the thing that I'm really impressed with is how well it handles a lot of the really tough questions with World War, especially the Italian campaign missions with the guy looking back, telling his daughter about his brother, and it's their birthday. They're in this assault, and the brother dies. And the ending of it, I think, captures a lot of the same questions that folks in Europe were asking. I'd say to an extent, with war memories, still are asking of both world wars, but especially World War One. Why did I live, but my brother or however many people from my family or this village didn't?
yeah. That was one of the things I really liked about Battlefield 1 was the way they did the single player experience for that. They broke it up into I think 4 or 5 war stories, and each story delved into like a major theme on the First World War. Uh, the Italian one was definitely one of the highlights in my opinion. Uh, that and the one set in the Middle East, uh, where you're playing as a female fighter with Lawrence of Arabia, which I don't think there's much historical evidence to back that, but it was still neat. um, and you still got to ride around on a horse through the desert, uh, fighting Ottoman soldiers. So it was still cool. And then they tried to do that again with Battlefield 5, just advancing it to World War II. Uh, and they told some interesting stories there as well. I know they did a commando raid, like a British commando raid in the Mediterranean. They did a sort of like stealth mission or stealth set of missions set in Norway, I think, as well.
Mm.
And the one that I was happiest to see was the role of the Senegalese in Operation Dragoon
Mm.
in late summer of '44, because they're dealing with these issues of race and empire and colonialism at the war that effectively starts the beginning of the end of the colonial era.
Yeah, I've not played Battlefield 5, so I'm hearing a lot of this for the first time because it's completely flown off my radar for the most part.
Yeah, it didn't do so well with its early promotions. Like its early advertising just didn't work out that well, and the beta I don't think had a lot of activity. It just it just didn't happen. Just didn't go off. But it's still there. Uh, my biggest issue with uh, Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 uh, is less how they told the stories that they did tell, and more the stories that they didn't tell. Especially with Battlefield 1, they make this whole deal about, the First World War was everyone's war. Everyone has a story to tell. Everyone who fought in this war has a story to tell. The implying that like the sample of stories that they have told you in the single player experience is a very good and healthy, overview of the war. Only they left out the French, which I feel like to leave out the French in a game about the First World War should not be allowed unless you're focusing on a theater that the French were completely uninvolved in. And they also left out the Germans. There's no like German war story, which I think would have been really interesting, especially at the time that it was coming out, because everyone's starting to like get really into Great War memory. Let's just throw a wrench in it and talk about the Germans, but they didn't. Which, if you're gonna say like this is everyone's war, we should maybe talk about the other side. And then with Battlefield 5, I get why they probably didn't put in any Americans or any like American-centric stories, because we have endless games, endless movies, endless books that cover all that. But they do put in the Germans. I think it was like a DLC war story that put you in charge of one of the last Tiger tanks at the end of the war. So I'm a little like. So we're not even going to acknowledge the American presence in the Second World War, but we are going to put you in charge of one of the last Tigers.
Yeah, that is odd.
And then they add the Americans as a playable faction with later DLC, but it's only in the Pacific.
That is an interesting choice.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting choices, and I wish I could get in contact with the writers of the Battlefield games, because I really want to ask them, why did you include these stories and why didn't you include others? Because I want to believe that there's like that there's an interesting reason and not just it's what we felt like.
I feel like a really interesting opportunity to throw a wrench in the works with World War II memory would be an Italian war story where you start off, fighting for Mussolini alongside the Germans. Then 43, the surrender happens, and all of a sudden you're fighting against the Germans.
That would be interesting. I think that would actually be really cool, because there are very few video game portrayals of the Italian front in both world wars, and with World War II especially, there's a lot going on in Italy all the way up to the very end of the war. I mean, there's an entire period in the Second World War where we thought we're just gonna have to get to Germany through Rome, because the Brits were too scared to go into France just yet. So we're just pouring resources into Italy. But yet there are so few, games and even only a handful of movies that really focus on that theater. The Mediterranean theater of operation. The only movies I can think of that cover that are, I think the most recent one that I can think of is Miracle at St. Anna, the Spike Lee movie about the 92nd Division. And I can't really think of any others except for like the Devil's Brigade, which is much older.
Yeah, there's the one. What is it? Is it A Walk in the Sun? That was a really early film set in Italy.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I think I remember seeing it a long while back on one of the classic movie channels on TV.
Hmm.
But it was made either in the 40s or the 50s. It might have actually been made before the war was over.
Hmm. Sorry. Jawan is texting me. Uh, oh, oh, lost my guest. Well, this is awkward. Well, I might have a different guest coming on in a few minutes, hopefully.
Yeah, so my cat kind of closed the stream.
Ah,
She has a peculiar habit of closing computer windows whenever she's not getting attention. She will ram into the mouse if hoping it does something occasionally, or she'll start fighting, one of the two.
all right.
And she just happened to jerk my hand up to the X. So
This is why I like dogs. They may be louder, but they don't do crap like that.
I mean, she's a very sweet cat, but when she's not getting attention, she turns into a little cuss.
So we might have Juwan coming on in a little bit. Uh,
Nice.
Back to what you were saying about movies set in the MTO. I just remembered there's a recent Netflix series. I think it's called The Liberator. I think part of it might be set in there. I know it follows uh, the 45th Infantry, which was in Italy for a hot minute. But I don't know if I haven't bothered to watch it because it's a weird uh, it's a weird animation style.
So I looked up the film I had in mind. It was released on Christmas Day, 1945.
uh,
So just after.
yeah, I mean that means they were probably filming it during the war.
It looks like it was based off of a book that came out in parts in 1944.
Yeah, but yeah, other than that, there aren't really like a lot of movies that are set in the Italian theater. And there are even fewer games that like even address the Italian theater. Like I can think of maybe three uh, that address the Mediterranean theater. Not even Italy, just Sicily. Um, and two of them are medals of honor.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the Medal of Honor PC titles,
Oh no,
DLC at least.
scratch that then. Four, um, because
Yeah,
there's there it's one of the expansions for Medal of Honor Allied Assault. I
was
think
it
part.
Breakthrough or Spearhead?
I think it's Breakthrough.
That's what I was thinking. Because didn't it go up into the fighting at the edge of the Alps in some of the later missions?
I don't know because I didn't finish either Breakthrough or Spearhead. Um,
Hmm. I
I just,
finished one, but not the other, and I know I finished the one that went to Italy. I didn't finish the one that goes to Berlin, the Soviets.
yeah, yeah. Allied Assault, Medal of Honor Allied Assault bit of a diversion. All right, game. History's kind of iffy. The expansions just get wild.
Yeah, blowing up an Italian troop ship.
Yeah, it's weird. Um, but yeah, 3 of them are Medal of Honors because there's that. There's Medal of Honor Vanguard, which I think came out on the PlayStation 2 and the Wii, and it was basically just Medal of Honor Airborne, just with a slightly different story. And then there's Medal of Honor Airborne, which does Operation Husky and Operation Avalanche, which actually is in Italy. I just remembered. And then there's Call of Duty Big Red 1, which has like a whole section in Sicily, and that's it. I don't think there are any, at least mainstream titles that like portray the Italian theater. I can certainly think of a couple like indie titles that cover that stuff.
She was getting bite happy.
See, I this is why I'm not a cat person. Cats just seem. I have met more mean cats than I have pleasant cats. I'm also allergic to cats, so it doesn't really.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah. all cats at some level are mean to me because they make me sneeze. But dogs are just loud. But in terms of
Oh, Juan's here.
Juan, are you there? You are a little choppy.
Oh, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, there you
Okay.
are.
I'm still in my World War II stuff, by the way.
Nice.
Nice.
Juan, we were just talking about what we've basically been talking about all night is things that we wish were portrayed accurately in video games. Is there anything that you wish you could see in like a mainstream AAA video game?
I'm racking my mind right now, so excuse the silence. I think one thing that I would love to see. I don't think this is necessarily answering the question, but one thing I would love to see would be a game where, well, both of you have played Mountain Blade Warband, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wish I could see some sort of mechanic where you have all this, historically accurate clothing, and then you mix and match depending on what your specific role is, if that makes sense. So, like, say for example, let's just say, I don't know, the Civil War. Say you're like doing an artillery unit or something, and then you choose either you want to wear a sack coat or an artillery shell jacket. You pick, but that's what you get to choose from. But if you're infantry, you don't have the artillery shell jacket. If that makes any sense. I would just love to see something mix match where I could just do whatever I want. Basically, virtual reenacting, because I can't afford real reenacting.
I think, not to go back to Battlefield because we've mentioned that half a dozen times
I'm
already.
curious. What have you guys already talked about?
We've been talking about war memory. Talked a lot about video games as an educational tool. Mentioned the folks over at the Royal Armories and all the awesome stuff that they've been doing, working with GameSpot magazine. which I'm just like mildly obsessed with because again, they validate me. The shit that they're doing is stuff I've been doing since last March. But yeah, we've been talking about that. We were just talking about. I think last thing we were talking about was video game and movie portrayals of the Mediterranean theater of the Second World War.
You mean the lack thereof?
Yes. Yeah.
That's interesting.
But, I think, but we have brought up Battlefield a couple times, and I think Battlefield 5 lets you customize your like soldiers' uniforms and equipment.
Yeah, but we all know the cancer that is Battlefield 5.
Yeah.
But since you mentioned the Mediterranean theater, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the war footage that is of I think it's the 36th in Italy. I forget exactly what battle or campaign it is. I think it's supposed to be 43. It could also be 44, but it is actually all staged. So it's actually in this documentary on Netflix, recent one. I think I talked to you about it, Andrew. I forget what it's called. I think it's like five returned or something like that.
Oh, is that one about like the war?
Like the
war
American, film. The American like propaganda / like, war film makers, the directors. Yeah. So apparently, and this actually really shocked me. So during the North Africa campaign, these directors went there and they were basically like feuding pretty much with each other to see like who was going to be in command of what in a way. And then like they ended up like once they actually got to the front, like the battles were like over. So the army was like, you know what? We're going to give you all this stuff and just go recreate the battle. So like they bombed villages that were already bombed just to get it on film. And then they rolled tanks through like they were liberating them. And then they got to Italy and the 36 had already actually gone through and like experienced the hell that was Italy for the 36th. And then they were like, okay, so we missed the entire battle. Let's just recreate it. So they went through and literally reenacted with the United States Army a battle that was maybe like a few months old.
Huh.
Yeah, and then they like air quotes liberated the town that the 36 had already been through. So if you see some footage of like Italy and like battle footage and all that, it's most likely staged by the United States government.
Yeah, there was one of the early World War II movies. I think it's the story of G.I. Joe. I think it was being made during the war, and
yeah, that's another interesting thing too.
A lot of like the large shots of like guys, portraying combat are actually like training exercises for these guys who are now done in Europe and are training to go to the Pacific Theater.
I wonder about what that transition must have felt like. It's like, okay, you're done fighting the Germans, now go fight the Japanese.
I mean, it happened. There were, I think, a handful of ETO units that actually made it to the Pacific before Japan surrendered. I don't think it didn't happen a ton, but it happened. But yeah, customization tends to be something that like gets dropped from historical video games, which makes sense in some regards, but makes less sense in other regards.
Yeah, like for your background, Andrew, for like Verdun or even Tannenberg, Like you have a mix match of equipment and gear, and you just kind of are assigned a uniform unless your actual squad has leveled up. So seeing like 1914 Poilu at I don't know Douaumont,
Yeah.
kind of a problem there.
Yeah. Or
But
like 1917 Americans in campaign hats at the
that
Somme.
too, yeah, there's a lot wrong with that. But there is one game that actually does have some sort of well, it's basically it's a online MMO called Heroes and Generals.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, that game. So I went back and played that game basically for that, but it's such a bad game. Like it's so bad. So then I was like, okay, this wasn't worth it. Even though the game's free, it wasn't worth it. So
Isn't that
just
the
don't play that game.
Isn't that the World War II game that has the Korean War M2 carbine?
Does it? I would
I'm
believe
pretty
it.
sure the M2 is in that.
Yeah, but the problem is, it's basically like you grind for different uniform attachments or upgrades or whatever, but you could basically wear whatever you want, which is a problem. Like you could have, you could mix match an airborne airborne uniform with HBTs if you wanted to. Yeah, it's basically online Farp Fest, and nobody knows the difference. But don't worry about it; it's a bad game, so basically nobody plays it.
I know. I used to play it.
Oh yeah, now War Thunder is making working on an infantry game.
They
I
are.
forget what it's
Oh.
called. They are. I forget what it's called, but it's like it's in a state where it's just not good, at least from what I've seen. Like it has cool concepts, but it's just not ready.
I don't know how they're gonna do that because isn't the whole point of War Thunder that like they mix and match like whole time periods?
Yeah. Well, I think it's primarily World War II.
So it's
It's not connected to War Thunder at all. It's just the people who make War Thunder.
So we're just gonna get another Hell Let Loose or Postscriptum. is what you're saying.
Actually, no. It's along the lines of Heroes and Generals, except Gaijin did it, so it's actually like not bad. But they're also trying to incorporate like a squad sort of thing. Not the game squad, but more of like you have a bunch of soldiers in your squad and you have to level them up individually and also play as them.
Oh,
and
okay.
it's just the game's not ready. It's just not ready.
It doesn't
And it's
seem like
it's incredibly hard to get an anti-tank anything. So if somebody shows up with a tank, you are screwed. And your men will die. So have fun.
It seems like they haven't really thought out the whole concept.
Yeah, no, I think they were like, we should make a game with infantry because people have requested it, but we don't know how. Sounds a lot like Gettysburg College in a way. Shout out, by the way.
Well, speaking of things sort of related to War Thunder, you know what's coming out soon on Steam?
Do I want to know, considering how you said it?
Regular World of Tanks. Not that World of Tanks Blitz nonsense. Actual regular World
Who
of Tanks.
cares?
People who like tanks more than they like warships, Jawan.
Fair enough. I'll give you that. You're just gonna play with the Sherman the entire time, aren't you?
Yes.
So enjoy being on fire.
I might also switch between the Sherman and the Stuart. Stuarts are nice. Stuarts are fun.
They're fun and fast until in a literally anything German gets an eye on it. Also, possibly Japanese in anything else.
Stuart is better than what was the name of the Japanese tank? The standard one? I always forget.
The pieces of
Chi-Ho.
shit. The stuff that Mitsubishi were like, we're gonna build great planes, but I don't really know if I'm qualified to build tanks. Oh, you're paying me to build tanks? Okay, I'll build tanks.
Yeah.
I saw a meme. It was a SpongeBob meme where Mitsubishi building planes is Patrick looking through a microscope, and then Mitsubishi building tanks is Patrick like hammering a nail into his head.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited for World of Tanks, like regular World of Tanks coming out.
I used to play the shit out of that, honestly, in like middle school and maybe high school.
Yeah.
Mostly middle school though.
I think the only one I got into was War Thunder. Some buddies got me really invested, and I was psyched because I forget which plane it was now. Maybe it was just one of the Yak fighters, one of the Soviet Yaks that I could fly. I don't remember why. I just really liked it.
So I was just looking at my desktop to see the games that I had, and have either of you heard of or checked out the Grand Tactician Civil War 1861-1865 game?
You've had
No.
you've had me name most of your brigades.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. So it's actually a great game. So it you could either start in, I think, maybe the spring of 1861, or all the way to maybe the spring / summer of 1863, as either the Confederates or the Union. And basically the whole game is kind of imagine a total war sort of setting. Yeah, there it is.
Yep.
Yeah, imagine a total war setting except like on steroids. Or more like, since it's Civil War, imagine more of like a Civil War, like Ultimate General Civil War, and what's the other game series?
It looks like
It's Ultimate General Civil War plus something else.
It looks like Ultimate General and what's it called?
Scourge of War.
I was thinking more it looks like Ultimate General and a Total War had a love child.
Yeah, the graphics for the battlefield remind me a lot of these pictures of Empire and Napoleon.
Yeah, it doesn't go that great into detail, but some of the details that you can have. Well, one, the sounds are great, and it's also made made mostly with Lionheart Filmworks, if you've ever heard of them.
Those guys?
Yeah, those guys.
Huh.
So it's like actually like accurate, although the intro as you open the game is just a bunch of farbs going around shooting guns, but the game itself is actually accurate. So the detail goes all the way down to you being able to design a whole brigade's uniform. So like you could pick the colors and also the style of the uniform. Plus, as you upgrade your own diplomacy, you could do USCTs or other units, and then those units will be added to the uniforms. Yes.
Sure. I have an important question.
Yes. It's not a multiplayer.
No, that's not my important question.
Okay.
My important question is, you said you can choose the style of uniform.
Yeah.
Can I outfit an entire army with New York State jackets?
You know what? I'm gonna boot up the game real quick and send you. I'm gonna send you a screenshot of the different styles. That helps. Maybe I can look it up. Hopefully, I can look it up. Because they don't have they don't have state jackets. They're not that detailed.
That's a shame.
If they did have state jackets, I would only get New York units. You could pretend. Use your imagination. I mean, it's not as good, but hey, use your imagination. They have that.
Well,
But the other really cool thing, I'll send you this, Andrew. So hopefully you could put it on there. They do have amazing pictures in each of the like the loading screens. They have original colorized pictures. I'm gonna send you one now that you guys might have already seen. Let me just get that and I'll put it. Where is it? There we are. There's one that you may or may not have seen. I just sent it to you, Andrew.
all right. Let me. All right. Hold on. Let me. All right. Well, Facebook's being a dick.
As per usual. I mean, when is it not? Oh, also, the other really cool thing. You could choose to have this. Oh, also, before I continue, with the customization of the brigades. Oh yeah, so it's brigade level and not regiment level. Customization of the brigades. You can choose the weapons of each brigade, and this goes from like the cliche Enfield, Springfield, all the way to like the Jocelyn rifle. The Jocelyn, you could have mixed muskets. You could have reboard muskets. 42s,
Yeah.
all everything basically. And also, the names, and you could also design your own rubric for your division or your army, whichever, as well as promoting people like actual like historically accurate officers and things like that. So for example, since we all know who he was, you could make Alonzo Cushing command a whole army if you wanted to.
Cool.
I don't know why you would, but you can.
So, pulled up the picture you
Okay,
sent me.
I've seen that picture before.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool having all the pictures actually be in color.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen this one colorized. That's really neat.
What is this?
I don't know actually. I think it's Virginia, maybe 64.
Because it has a Western feel to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like I would think.
Part of me feels like because of the siege works, it might be for late war Virginia.
I mean, there were
But
some,
at the same time,
there were some epic sieges in the West.
Fair enough.
Part of me wants to say Atlanta, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'm thinking either Atlanta.
I don't think it's Atlanta.
Vicksburg. Part of me wants to say Vicksburg, but it could be Virginia.
I want to say Virginia, but hey, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Joanne, by bringing up that picture, you brought up a very interesting thing that a lot of these historical-based video games do tend to make ample use of primary sources in just like their general aesthetic design. I know games like Verdun and Tannenberg just toss original photographs into the loading screens all the time. And game that we mentioned earlier, Valiant Hearts, The Great War.
Great game. Love it. Definitely did not cry at the ending.
But like the collectibles that you can get in the game, teach you stuff about the First War. They reveal primary source documents. I know. I was actually recently going through Brothers in Arms. The extras, like the unlockable stuff in the game, some of them are actually like actual after action reports from the 101st
Really?
Airborne. Yeah. and they're just in this video
Cool.
game.
That's cool, but also I feel like that could get dark quick.
Like they're like battalion and regimental level after actions. So I think they have like an excerpt of Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole's after action report from that little charge he led that got him a Medal of Honor during Normandy. So stuff like that. But it is always cool to see historical video games actually use historical sources and present those historical sources to the players.
Yeah.
Certainly gives them a bit more merit, at least for educational purposes.
Yeah, that's definitely yeah. Well, yeah, I'm going through my Steam library to see what great games I have that are also historical. And well, one I think I told you, Andrew. I think I showed you also. The B-17 Flying Fortress, the Mighty Eighth game. That one's pretty great. Let's see, another one that I just thought of, which is technically historical, but also not, I guess, as in like not based on anything super specific. Is it's a pirate game. Trying to find where it is in my library.
Is this that pirate game that made you want to do pirate reenacting?
I don't know. Oh,
that
Sea
would be a lot of
Dogs.
fun.
Sea Dogs.
Sea Dogs.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an old game. You could look it up on Steam. It's a very old game, but so Zach, for context, I wrote a pirate paper for Shannon,
Okay.
and pirates were dicks in general, especially to people who were not white. People who were African specifically, because yeah. Anyway, Sea Dogs is based in, I think, the 17th century. I want to say the Spanish are at war with England. Yes, very old game.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember seeing this for sale
Yeah,
way
and
back when.
so you're an English captain, and you attain a letter of marque, and basically, you can go pillaging the Spaniards. But the thing that I love but also hate about this game is it's very unforgiving. It's very unforgiving. You can make a lot of money just doing non actual, pirate stuff. Like you could simply just be like a guard, as a privateer. You could guard somebody, like escort them somewhere, or simply deliver some goods, for money, because you need money, but you also don't want to die. And if you get into any armed combat, I mean, if you win, it's a tremendous payday. But if you lose, the enemy is just going to ditch your body on a beach, and or just dump you overboard and let you get eaten by sharks. They don't care.
Well,
It's very unforgiving.
It's interesting that you brought up pirates and attitudes towards non-white people, because I have been reading a book. I think it came out last year about Captain Henry Every's attack on the Mughal ships that were coming back from the pilgrimage to Mecca.
Interesting. Okay.
And yeah, it was really wild. They before they left Madagascar, they exploded a mosque with gunpowder. They
Nice.
yeah, they basically went on a 2 or 3 day I don't really know how to say it other than
Like
just
pillaging spree?
no. Well, pillaging, rape, pretty much whatever terrible thing comes to mind with the people that were on board one of the ships coming back from Mecca, because there were a lot of women aboard it that made the pilgrimage.
Well,
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I was reading, well, my paper was about the relationship between the transatlantic slave trade and the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean, and the relationship that I found was well, yeah, black pirates did exist, but there's not a whole lot of records of them, and mainly because like none of them were super famous, pretty much, and but they did exist for like numerous different reasons, but from what I found, Blackbeard was kind of the only famous pirate who actually had black pirates amongst his crew. And apparently, in his last battle, there were maybe a quarter or maybe a third of his crew were black when he was killed, and but the entirety of the crew were taken captive, questioned, and then they were killed. Because pirates. But anyway, so one of the stories that I read, one of the stories that I read was from, I think, the 1680s, maybe 1670s. English privateer captain captured a ship off the coast of Puerto Rico, a Spanish ship, slave ship, and there were slaves on board, and they took over the ship. And apparently, the privateers were like, "So there are these slaves, but like that's all they have. How are we gonna sell them? Because we can't just like go to the Spaniards and like, hey, we have your slaves. We're gonna sell them to you." So one of the I think the slave I guess captain on board was like, "Hey, if you let me go, I'll help sell these slaves and give you the money." And they're like, "Okay." So they let him take a dinghy to San Juan, and he just disappeared, just never came back, because as any smart person would. So then the captain's like, "Well, fuck, we have these slaves. What do we do with them?" And then he was just like, "Okay, I can't sell these slaves, so we're just gonna dump them on Puerto Rico, sink the ship, and bounce." So that's what they did. Yeah. And then there's another story of these pirates. I think this is like 1710s, maybe. These pirates off the coast of Africa stopped to fill up their resupply with their water, and they see a couple of Africans canoeing, and the Africans take a couple of pirates to a watering hole, and they don't return for some hours, and then the pirates are like, "I'm getting pissed off." So then they started capturing random Africans that just happened to walk past or canoe past their ships, and they kept them captive. And then the next day, they just hung them. And this is all documented. Like one guy was writing about what was going on, and they just started killing these Africans for no reason.
Captain Every, after the attack on the Mughals, used slaves that he bought from, I think, French traders on the island of Reunion off Madagascar as a cover to avoid the gold that they had taken from the Mughals being seized and the British government getting wise to the fact that, well, at this point, still the English government getting wise to the fact that they had maybe just sunk the East India Company's hopes.
That's actually hilarious.
And they made it to the Bahamas with all these slaves that they had bought, and I think most, if not all of them, were sold on the Bahamas. I think in Nassau. So they were some of the earliest slaves, I think, in that part of the Bahamas.
So they probably. Oh, was this like 17th century?
Yeah, it was 1690s.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say they probably helped like settle the island, maybe, but they also probably didn't survive because apparently the Spanish like laid waste to Nassau.
Yeah, this was the rebuilt town of Nassau after the Spanish got through. That I think it was 10 years after the Spanish came through that Every arrived. But
There's a new series that I just started watching on Netflix. I forget what it's called exactly, but it's something like the Pirate Kingdom on Netflix. It's a new show, just came out, and it's if you're familiar with the series of documentaries slash television dramas that Netflix has been producing, like the Ottoman conquest ones or the Roman Empire ones. It's basically like that except pirates, and they have historians talking about the history and the context behind all of that, and then they have actors acting out what exactly is going on so you can see it. And I started watching it. I mean, the intro's a little funky because they're like the pirates were um, uh, not necessarily against slavery, but I'm forgetting the exact word. But they're like basically like the pirates supported emancipation, and I'm like, only one really did, and that was Blackbeard. And then they're like, at the end of the intro, they're like, the pirates were the original, the first forefathers of modern America. I'm like, really, really?
Those are some wild claims.
Yeah. I mean, are they just ignoring the fact that the pirates just like took whatever they wanted and didn't care about the consequences?
a lot of
Like,
historians seem to be jumping on that bandwagon lately. Or not,
really?
maybe not historians, but like popular histories about pirates keep going on. Like, yeah, they were the first Americans and stuff. It's like not exactly, but
No, they raped and pillaged everybody. Do you really
It's
want to call them heroes or Robin Hoods? Like, I don't think so.
it's funny you mention pirates being in favor of emancipation, even though we just talked about you know all these pirates who very much did not have uh, kind views on other
Yeah,
races,
no.
because one of the most well-known pirate video games actually kind of goes in that direction of being of like the anti-slavery pirates. Assassin's Creed 4,
I was wondering which game you would
at a
mention,
wallet.
yeah,
but yeah, that is true. Yeah,
like, and like, it kind of makes sense. It's kind of hard to make a video game protagonist that's like, I think black people should be enslaved. Um,
yeah.
like
At
that
least
would not
one
be
that
that
you
would not go
actually
over
like.
well.
Yeah, at least one that you actually sympathize with.
Yeah, you'd probably just spend most of your time playing the game throwing yourself off a large cliff. Um, but you know, that's one of those instances where the video game deviates significantly with the historical record. And I mean, the Assassin's Creed series does have a lot of examples of that, but that's one of the more subtle examples.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah, you mentioned that, Andrew. You really don't see like hardly any black people in that game. Now that I realize, like, you kind of just see Adewale and like maybe a handful of other people, at least from what I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You see a lot of them on the island plantations.
That's true, but are any of them actually pirates? Like, you liberate the plantations, but like that's it.
Yeah.
I think there might have been a handful in Nassau, but there were not many of that I
Yeah,
recall.
yeah. I think the developers of AC4 took that from Blackbeard, because one of the most famous stories of black pirates is Black Caesar, who supposedly was the second in command for Blackbeard, supposedly. And he was also supposedly captured and um, subsequently hanged after Blackbeard was killed. There's really no record of Black Caesar except stories. Basically, Black Caesar, the story of Black Caesar is he was, I think, African royalty. And then maybe some sort of betrayal happened where he was captured as a. Actually, no. The story is, I think he was engaging in the slave trade. And then these slavers tricked him and a few other black guys to come on to their ship, and then they captured them. And then we're going to sell them as slaves. And then they ran into a storm. They were set free that way. And then they ended up like, you know what? We're just going to pirate this entire area. And then somehow linked up with Blackbeard. And then Blackbeard was like, I like you. And then they just, cruised the Caribbean and wreaked havoc. Supposedly, that's the story. I also heard from the Netflix series that Blackbeard might have actually been part of an actually like rich family from, I think, the Bahamas. And apparently, he was made magistrate of Nassau, and was also probably actually educated. Which, that's an interesting thing that I found. A lot of famous pirates were actually like well-known gentlemen, at least gentlemen in the respective like class in their area, which is really interesting.
I'd like to see some of the sources that they have behind these documentaries.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very curious where they got this information.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I was thinking that Blackbeard was probably, however cliche it is, it's also true that, I was thinking that he might have been one of those, English sailors that just happened to get, laid off after the British were like, yeah, we have no use for sailors anymore because we beat the British, but also we're in debt. Cause especially since the name of his ship is Queen Anne's Revenge.
Yeah.
And there was a naval war with Spain called Queen Anne's War. So I was like, maybe he was a sailor during Queen Anne's War. Coincidence?
I mean,
Yeah, because a lot of those sailors were West Country.
Yeah. A bunch of them, I think one specifically is Sam Bellamy. I think it was named Black Sam Bellamy, if anybody's heard of him. Apparently he was, he used to be a sailor in the English Navy, and he was ditched in the American colonies. And he apparently is, he was the richest pirate in, recorded, that is. So it's not just hearsay.
Well, we started out talking about World War I and video games. And
hey, pirates are dope. Well,
two hours and
unless they're
almost
pillaging
20
you.
minutes later, talking about pirates. I would say this is weird, but this is exactly what happens when we're playing Verdun. So
that's actually true. Yeah.
Yeah.
1 minute we're talking about the Belgians in 1914. The next we're talking about Belgian waffles.
I mean, what do you think those tall hats were used for?
Exactly.
Melting chocolate.
No, brewing very good beer.
Yes.
Well, we have been going for almost 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is rough. It's actually a bit longer than we usually do for Dun nights, and significantly longer than we've been doing Tannenberg. So I think this will probably have to be the place where we cut it. Thank you to everyone who has watched. Thank you, Zach and Jawan, for coming on. Jawan, I know you're probably tired from your film shoot all day, Mr. Movie Star.
I actually have one speaking role in there.
Nice.
So it's nice. Also, I turned that film into an X rating because of original my original smut comic that I got from a veteran's Foot Locker.
Jesus Christ, John.
Yes. Hey, they had a close up of me and Ben, so I was like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna turn this possible G rating into an X rating.
Well, anyway. God damn it.
I saw my opportunity.
This may happen again sometime in the future because who knows what's going to happen when we run out of new squads to do in Verdun and or Tannenberg. Who knows what the future will bring for all that. All I know for certain is that starting March 24th, there will be a weekly Barry McHistory live stream here on Twitch. And there may be guests on, there may not be guests on. Who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, this will definitely happen again. And hopefully we'll get more people watching and interacting. So thank you all. If you missed any part of this or you just feel like watching us talk about random history crap again, a recording of this will actually go up on the Barry McHistory YouTube channel probably Sunday or Monday. So in a couple days. But other than that, thank you and good night.